Hi, how are you all today? So in Bakersfield, it's like 54 degrees today. That's cold. We're like freezing to death. But notice that I'm in short sleeves. In the house, it's comfortable. If I were to go outside, I might throw a sweater on. Hello, Francois. Hello, Emily, Lois, Andrea Miller. Hello, Andrea. Um, Robbie, Pamela, Kate, Sylvia, Emily, hello. Um, so, did you guys get the update about the sleeves? I made a couple of boo-boos in there and had to send out a revision. That's why sometimes I have to wait when I write these things, because if my brain is not in tip-top shape, I make a lot of mistakes. Mostly I write off the top of my head, but some of the times the top of my head is not working very well, which was the case this week. So I think it's all straightened out now, and I really appreciate everyone's patience when those things happen. Um, let's see, who else is on here? Lori, Demetria, hello, Dolise, Terry, Anne Tremoliers, Aline, Diana, Linda, Diane Aubrey. So this is very fun. And hello, Claire, and everybody at the Twisted Skein. Claire put me on the TV there today, so this is kind of funny. It's an adventure. So I sent out the instructions for the sleeves, and we are just chugging right along because the very next section will be on blocking. And to me, blocking is a big deal. So I will have instructions, specific instructions on how to block along with a video. And I'll get some of my local people here to come over and help me do that video. We've done that a couple times before. We kind of have a little crew and it works very well. Last time we had kind of a fun time because I shared some of my knitting. And Dolise asked some questions specifically about the two swatches where I used the lace weight yarn and doubled it up for some of the rows. So we'll talk about those again. Oh, here's Deborah from Orange County. Hello. Sandra Pinkerton from Ohio. And Kathy from Australia. Hello. So I also have some books out here. And because you've been interested in my library, my knitting, this is not my knitting library. In this library, the majority of the books you see are my husband's. Now, I am facing another wall that is all my books that are non-knitting. I have another room, which is our entertainment room, and I have an entire wall of knitting books in there, and I may take a picture of it or something and show you. But I thought what I would do is just bring some books out from time to time and tell you what it is that I like about them and why I own them. And I thought I would start that today. Also, this week, I did my little video on the Annetarsia cables in the round. This is so darn cute. Oh my goodness. And it's so simple once you figure out how to do it. The inside is really tidy. And you can do this, can you imagine putting Annetarsia on a hat, Annetarsia in the round, some cables like this on a hat or on the back of a mitten, a fingerless mitt, up the side of a sock. Wouldn't that be cute? Oh my God, I can think of all kinds of uses of doing the Annetarsia cable in the round. So that was fun. I still have to do 2 videos on doing the Annetarsia cables coming down into 2-color brioche knitting. Those are on my list. So this was my list of videos for last week. You can't see it very well. There's the writing. Here's my list of videos for this week. So I make these little lists, and sometimes I get them all done, sometimes I don't. But I'm my own boss, so I can do it however I want. So let's see. Suzanne from Germany, good evening. Bina from Florida. Regina from Ohio. Carlotta, hello, Carlotta. And some of you, I wish I could, well, all of you, I wish I could meet you in person because I feel like we're becoming good friends. Hello, Carolyn. Carolyn Nichols is one of my friends. She lives up in the Fresno area. Oh, she says, I'm one of those people that didn't trust my gauge. What should I do? Well, Carolyn, you're going to have to let me know where you are in your sweater and what's going on, and we can figure that out. Maybe you could send me an email and some pictures. That would be very cool. So Dolise had talked about, I had these two swatches. Can you see that where it stripes? So I use, this is like lace weight, very fine lace weight yarn. And for some of the rows, I doubled it, and some of the rows I used it one strand. I said ply last time in the video when I rewatched it. I don't mean one ply, I mean a strand. What comes out of my mouth and what my brain thinks I'm saying are often two different things. So you just have to excuse me. Sometimes I say right when I mean left, and I can't even tell that I'm misspeaking because my brain thinks I'm saying the right thing. So anyway, you can see that's a very subtle effect, and I really like it. See that? Also notice that the swatch, it's a good size swatch, and there's no change at the edge. See, it doesn't pull in at the edge there. It's straight up and down. So that's a big clue. Dolise asked whether it changes your gauge. For this swatch, it did not. This is the other swatch where I used a heavier lace weight. This is the Anzula Breeze. And you can see there's only one stripe across the middle. And again, the edge is not pulled in there where I have a single strand. I don't think it's as effective in this, or in this, maybe I should have gone up a needle size because you really can't see the change in the stripe. It's too subtle. And I wouldn't go to all that work for something that you can't see. So maybe for this swatch, the answer is to go up. I think I used like a 7 on this, maybe go up to an 8 or a 9 and see if it makes a difference. This one, I think I used a 5 and it looks just fine. See the stripes there? I love it. I think that would be so cute for a top. So, and then speaking of gauge, hello, Claudio. Hello, Sandra. Hello, Mary and Valerie. Have you guys seen this cool tool? This is a handy gauge ruler by Anne Budd. And these are so awesome. Now, this does not replace measuring your gauge the appropriate way, which is measuring as many viable stitches as you can. But for a quick check, like when you're checking your fabric in process, this is great. So you can see the white V's. There's also black V's intermixed with them. You just can't see it on this. Let me see if you can see it up close. There you can see the black V's. See them? So what you do is you just lay this over your fabric like this. And you match up the V's with the stitches underneath, and then it tells you the gauge. This is the coolest little tool. I give this to all, I don't give, but in the beginning knitting class that I teach, the students buy a kit, and in their kit, they all get one of these. This is a great, great tool. Charlotte, good evening from Sweden. Yes. This is from Anne Budd. It's called Handy Gauge Ruler. So you can check at your local yarn store, see if they have these. I love them, but it is not a replacement for measuring your gauge. It's just a handy little tool to have in your notions bag to quickly check, like if you're working on your sweater and checking down. And I know I mentioned before, but I think I'm going to mention it again, that when you're knitting, you want to constantly recheck your gauge. And you're not checking your gauge against your blocked swatch because your sweater gauge in process is not going to be the same as your blocked swatch. What you want to do is check your gauge down here with the gauge in your sweater up here. Like if you're knitting top down, if you're knitting bottom up, of course, you'd be checking it lower. And as you move through your project, recheck your gauge with the beginning gauge at the beginning of your sweater, even on the sleeve. And remember, we did the second swatch for the sleeve. Well, that's a good question. I'll address that in a second. For the swatch for the sleeve, um, we knit in the round, right? And compared it to our knitting flat swatch. So you want to, that's super important, because if your sleeve, if you're knitting in the round gauge is different, significantly different, like if it's like 5 or 10% different, that's a small change. It can show in the sleeve. It can make your sleeve too tight or too large. Plus you'll get a line right there where you started your sleeve. This person just needs to be removed. We have a stalker, and I'm reporting him. Report. Okay, so if anybody sees anybody on here saying inappropriate things, just get rid of them, kick them out. Okay, so let's go back to Valerie. Let's see. Deborah Cisneros asked, what items do I put in my kits for the beginning knitting class? From the first time I taught, I call it Boot Camp 1 now. It's a 10-week course, 2 hours, one night a week for 10 weeks. And the first time I taught it, I gave my students a list of supplies to bring to class in an email with links to yarn, like I suggested Patton's wool or Cascade 220, you know, the ones that are 100% non-superwash wool in a light or off-white color. And those yarns are smooth, they're worsted weight, you can see your stitches. Well, that first class, people brought what they had at home rather than going out and getting the things that I specified for the class. And you would be amazed at what people brought to class for learning how to knit, like chenille yarn or novelty yarn or things with little bobbles and bloops in them or fuzzy. There's no way you can learn how to knit on those types of yarns. You need to be able to see your stitches. So that taught me a big lesson. From that point forward, I provided kits that the students needed to purchase for the class. And in the kits, I have 100 grams of worsted weight, off-white, natural, non-superwash yarn. I have a US 7 needle, and I prefer the Haya Sharps or Chow Gu lace because they have both lovely pointy tips on them. It's easier to make stitches. Some people worry that those pointy tips are more likely to split your yarn, but in reality, yarn splitting is a knitter problem and not a needle problem. So if you're having problems splitting your yarn, you need to kind of look at how you're making your stitches very carefully, see what's happening and why you're splitting the yarn. Some yarns are splitty too, but the yarns I use in my classes are not splitty yarns. So if people are splitting them, I need to really look closely at how they're knitting and how they're creating their stitches to see why the yarn is splitting, because there's a problem. I also include that little ruler like this. I include some stitch markers, some little embroidery scissors, one of these needle gauges, which I think are the best ones on the market, the most accurate. Nancy's Knit Next is the one that makes these, but she makes them for all the yarn stores that want to purchase them from her. So she'll put their logo on the front here. So you'll see all different kinds of logos. This one is from Nancy's Knit Next. One of the things I did when I was doing my master hand knitting program is I compared needle gauges. And I collected as many as I could, all the different ones. And I compared them, and it was amazing the differences between them. Some of them were not accurate at all. This one is the most accurate, and I like it. So anytime you see this shape, this is a really good needle gauge. And so I put that in the bag. And let's see, I put tags so people can tag their swatches. They make like, I think 18 or 19 swatches in that first class. So they all have tags so they can label the ones that's knit two togethers and SSKs and so on, so they can identify them later. A tapestry needle and those sorts of things. Let's see. That was that. Let me see. What if you find your sweater changes gauge as you knit, or if your sweater gauge is different from your unblocked swatch? Emily, that's a great question. What happens is you relax or you tense up. One or the other's probably happened. You may have been tense when you started your sweater and then you started relaxing, or it's a different time of day, or your mood is different, or you've had a glass of wine, or your grandkids are over visiting. All sorts of things can change your gauge. What you need to do is just become aware that it's changed so you can either loosen up or tighten up. If all else fails, change needle size. But just becoming aware that your gauge has changed a little bit can get you back on course, and you can look at it. If your stitches are getting looser, then you know you need to tighten up a little bit. If they're getting too tight, you're probably tense. You need to have a glass of wine and then continue knitting. So try those things. Also, when you're knitting your swatch, you need to knit. That's why I always recommend knitting a bigger swatch, because you have to get in your zone to knit a swatch that big. And that's when you're going to get your most accurate gauge. If you knit itty bitty little swatches, the whole time you're probably tense and concentrating on that swatch. And that swatch is going to lie to you because it's not going to give you your real tension that you use for knitting. The swatch and measuring yourself are the two most important things in producing a sweater that fits, and then maintaining your gauge as you work through the sweater. Okay. Sandra, got mine from the yarn shop. Good morning from Alaska, Julia. Hello. Evelyn, hello, Evelyn. And Evelyn's been in several of my knitting classes here in Bakersfield, and she says, I love my kit. I use it all the time. When I make those kits up, I really try to think, if I were a brand new knitter, what are the vital things? Oh, I also put one of those Susan Bates handy tools in there. I forgot about that. I think about what are the vital things that I would need to get off successfully in my knitting, and that's what I put in the kit. Okay. Oh, Deborah says, I also find the amount of time I block off each session has an impact on my gauge. Are you saying when you start and stop, it changes your gauge? Is that what you're saying? Or how much time you knit? The time of knitting may affect your gauge because you tend to either get tired and loosen up, or you relax and loosen up. Okay, so let's see. We've talked about those swatches last time. Let's look at these books that I have, okay? And I'm going to tell you, oh, Claire, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I read a text from Claire. Claire is watching this at the shop, but she can't comment on here. She hasn't figured out how to do that yet. She says hello to Carolyn Nichols. So Carolyn, Claire is saying hi to you. Okay. Valerie Jones says sometimes the diameter of indie dyer yarn varies even within a single skein. That may be true. Most of the indie dyers, though, there are only a few yarn mills in the United States that create yarn for hand dyeing. It's a small number. And the majority of the hand dyers get all of their yarn from the same mills. So it's very interesting. If you go to a very large knitting convention like Stitches West in Santa Clara, where there's between 8,000 and 12,000 knitters all at one place, and they have about 600 vendors in the market, you can look at a lot of yarn. And if you actually study, you'll start identifying the yarn bases. There are only so many yarn bases. It's a small number, and all of the dyers use those same bases. So once you start learning the bases that you like and which dyers use those, and this is like tried and true, just you have to try it yourself. You have to go and look at the yarn. You have to feel it. You have to actually open up the skeins. I do that. I open up skeins, because if I'm going to be purchasing it, I want to know what I'm purchasing. I always open the skeins before I buy them. Then you can see the consistency of the yarn. So if you are working with yarn from an indie dyer that does not have a consistent width to the yarn or not giving you a consistent gauge, I would keep track of that and maybe not buy yarn from that indie dyer anymore unless there's some other qualities about it that you really, really like that you can't get from anybody else, and then you would overlook the inconsistencies, okay? So let's start out. This is an awesome book. This is the revision. This came out in, this one came out in 2004. It came out in 2004. The original version I think came out in 1984, which I have that too, but I loaned it to our guild's knitting library. This is Knitting in the Old Way by Priscilla Gibson-Roberts. Priscilla is a very interesting person. I had the wonderful opportunity to meet her at the first Sock Summit. She has a very severe back disability that prevents her from traveling on airplanes. But she is one of the renowned original people in the history of modern day knitting to do research on knitting. And the way she did her research, she couldn't travel to do her research because of her back. But her husband was in the military, and all of his friends were in the military. And often the other guys, when they went overseas, their wives would go with them. And Priscilla wouldn't. She stayed home because she couldn't travel. But she would ask the wives to bring back samples of the knitting from all the different places they went in the world. And she collected these samples. And she deconstructed them and looked at them and figured out how they were made. And she developed a sense of the history and the sequence of how knitting developed. Knitting in the Old Way is a book on all the different styles of knitting sweaters. You know, they were called jumpers originally. And she walks you through the steps from the earliest construction. It's a history of knitting, but she walks you through the steps of the earliest constructions to modern construction. So she starts out, the first one is growing a sweater, a sample plan. And this is just a drop shoulder sweater. So it can be knit up from the bottom or top down based upon how, and she tells you how to figure out the different dimensions. You start out with the body circumference, how much should the sleeve be, et cetera, et cetera. And then she goes, oh, on the different styles of sleeves. I wonder where I got this information. Do you see that? That I just put out? This is one of the books that I have studied. Then she talks about evolving the shape. So here we have a little underarm curve there. See, it's a drop down, but now there's a little curve at the underarm and a little bit of waist shaping. Then she goes to how you figured out the underarm gusset from that curve and what does the gusset do, and so on and so forth through this whole book. And she goes up to, you know, stranded knitting and all of these things. But if you want to learn about sweater construction, here we are at a yoke. Guess what we're going to do next? You see that? And she has the raglan in here, and she talks about the different styles. It's a really great book. It is not a pattern book. It's about how to choose the size and shape. And she assumes that once you do that, you can knit, that's exactly how I teach knitting. You get your body shape, what you want to make. You figure out your stitch gauge from the fabric you like, and then you make it. That's how I teach knitting. Now I want to read to you something in the very first page. This is the cover. This is the very first page down here. I read my books and I find the most interesting things. This one says, knitting in the old way means knitting by thinking, not by following. I should make that my mantra. Then she said, this book guides you to discover a way of knitting. It unfolds a process that connects you to centuries of textile wisdom and helps you work within traditional methods or invent and create designs of your own. That's heavy duty to me. And then the very next page, she has these little things that are just through here. This is just the very next page before even the introduction. She says, "It's what you do that makes your soul." That's a quote from Barbara Kingsolver in Animal Dreams. It's what you do that makes your soul. And that's why us, we knitters, the people are us folks, when we knit, knitting comes from our soul. I will put Emily wants to know if I'll put the title and author of the books that I speak of in the description of this video. Yes, I will. So, wasn't that awesome? And you don't find those things unless you read your knitting books. If you just look at the pictures, you're going to miss out on that. Each week, each time I do this, I'll bring 1 or 2 books in. I have some more, okay? This is by Ysolda Teague. This book opened my eyes so much to body shaping. This is called Little Red in the City. And she wrote this, let's see, quite some time ago. She's still very young, young lady. This came out in, where's the date? Come on. There's no date. Well, I bought it, let's see, on January 21st, 2012. So it came out before then, okay? I don't see a publishing date. It may be that it's self-published. Anyway, what I love about this book and what I learned from this, she does have patterns in it, and they're really cute. But what she has that is amazing is she talks about looking at your body and fitting your body. She also talks a lot about swatching, of course. But let me find this part. Let me show you. Oh, she has some pages on, measuring yourself. It's the same sort of thing, swatching, measuring yourself. Really, those are the bottom lines. You have to swatch and measure yourself. And then she talks about ease, but creating a perfect fit. She has a whole chapter on creating a perfect fit, and she talks about bust shaping in here. She's one of the first ones that I read about bust shaping and her direction, and she's talking about big girl knits type things. So I learned so much about, this is where I learned how to do the increases and decreases in the body of the sweater rather than in the sides. It creates a much nicer and more gentle shaping than doing your increases and decreases at the waist, at the sides, which most people recommend doing. She talks about the short row shaping for your bust and where to place the short rows. So this is a really good book, especially if your body is not the standard Twiggy body. Does everybody remember Twiggy? That's really old. Okay, so that's a good book. I love that book too. Okay, it really made me think more about, because when I teach classes like this, I want to teach classes that everybody gets something from, not just people with perfect figures. The majority of us do not have perfect figures, so I try to gear towards all of those people. The ones with perfect figures, they can just read patterns and knit them. Okay, but most of us don't have perfect figures. Yes, Twiggy and Swinging London. Yes. Okay, this is the beginning of Barbara Walker's A Treasury of Knitting Patterns. Now, when I met Priscilla Gibson-Roberts, that was at the first Sock Summit, and I don't remember what year it was. It was like 2009, I think, around there, 2008, 10, somewhere in there. But they had Anna Zilberg, I always say her name wrong, Anna Zilberg, Meg Swanson, Priscilla Gibson-Roberts, Barbara Walker was there teaching classes. Can you imagine? And I took classes from all of those people because those are the historical women during our time period that are still happen to be alive. And I wanted to see them and meet them and talk with them because they are my idols. So This is the first of her stitch dictionaries. This is the first one, and it's just full of stuff. Okay, a gazillion patterns. Someone asked her at that conference, did she design all of these? She said no, she collected them. It's like a cookbook. She collected all of these designs from all over the place. Some of them she did herself. The mosaic knitting is all Barbara Walker. Nobody had done any mosaic knitting prior to Barbara Walker. Barbara Walker developed mosaic knitting. But the coolest thing about this book that I like is in the very beginning, when she's talking about knitting, she also says some really cool things about knitting. So she says on the first page past the index, this is page 3. She says, there are 3 things about knitting of which many a knitter is, but should not be ignorant of. The first is that knitting is one of the oldest of crafts. Its history extends back almost to the origins of human culture, which is true. The second is that knitting was developed largely by men, not by women. And in the beginning, it was knitting guilds, and only men could join the guilds. It was kind of like, the electricians' union or the plumbers' union. It was the knitting union, and it was men. And the third is that the variety, flexibility, and adaptability of patterns in knitting are practically infinite. That is what I love about knitting. I can learn and learn and learn and learn, and there is always more to learn. Okay, so the next thing about this book, when I was studying, doing my master's on knitting, this is the first reference that I could find to an SSK. An SSK is the same thing as slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over. It's just worked in a different maneuver, but it produces the exact same results. You can compare the two for yourself. Do a slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over, and then do an SSK and look at them and see if you can tell the difference. Okay, so in her book, on page 7, she says, in the glossary of terms and abbreviations, SSK, slip, slip, knit. In this book, the abbreviation SSK is used instead of the usual decrease, slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over, because it is shorter, less easily confused with slip one, knit two together, pass slip stitch over, and when done as directed makes a neater looking decrease than the usual one. Instead of slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over, work SSK as follows. Slip the first stitch and then the second stitches knitwise one at a time, then insert the tip of the left-hand needle into the fronts of these 2 stitches from the left and knit them together from this position. She is the first one to describe this. The SSK was developed also by Barbara Walker. She is the mother of the SSK. So I just thought you'd be interested in knowing that. All of her books are worth owning. I own all of them. Is that enough books, or do you want to see some more? Are you getting tired of books? Anybody else want to see some more books? I have some more here. Okay. This is Montse Stanley's Knitter's Handbook. Montse Stanley is the author, and it's called The Reader's Digest Knitter's Handbook. And I don't know what Reader's Digest has to do with it other than maybe they published it. This is the paperback version. I also have the hardback version. And this is just full of diagrams and pictures, the whole thing. There's no patterns in here. It's just how to make all the different stitches. So if you want to know how to do something, like here, here's a buttonhole. Guess what we're going to be doing? There's some more buttonholes. This is the Bible on how to make specific stitches. And this is an invaluable addition to your library. You can't read it. You could, it's kind of dry. But if you want to look and see how to make a specific stitch that you don't know how to, like central double decrease, you could look it up here, and she'll probably tell you 2 or 3 different ways to do the same thing. What I love about her book is when you look up something in here, not only does she tell you how to do it, but she'll say something about it. Like, for example, did you know that the cable cast-on and the knitted cast-on are 2 completely different cast-ons? A lot of people confuse the 2. Cable cast-on, of all the cast-ons that I know, is the very tightest cast-on that you can create. It's great for buttonholes. I don't know what else. Maybe the top of a pocket. If you're doing a pocket top down, the top edge, you could do a cable cast on that would keep the top of the pocket from stretching out. But you don't want to use that for casting on a hat or a sock or the neck or the bottom of a sweater, because it has no give. Whereas a knitted cast on, which is very similar, they're worked very similar, has a lot more give, and you can adjust it more easily to have more flexibility. She will tell you things like that in here. She'll tell you that the knitted cast on is really tight and it's good for buttonholes. So this is a good book. The last 2 things, sometimes I state my personal preferences. There are times when I make mistakes by saying those personal preferences, and I wish I could put it back in my mouth, but it comes out too late. But this one I really thought about, and I've been thinking about it for a long time. Many years ago, Arenda Holliday, who is my mentor, she's the CEO of TKGA, the Knitting Guild Association, she challenged me. We were sitting in an airport waiting for a plane, and she said, Suzanne, I want you to figure out how to do intarsia in the round. And I worked on that for a long, long time. I made a gazillion little baby socks, intarsia, argyle socks, baby socks, trying to figure it out. And I also did a ton of research on intarsia, every book I could find that mentioned intarsia. And I came across this book again by Priscilla Gibson-Roberts. And this book was put out in the year 2001. On this page 79, she shows how to do intarsia in the round. And that's where I found the answer. Then, interestingly enough, in 2014, Berk wrote this book called Annetarsia. And guess what? Guess what the Annetarsia technique is knitting intarsia in the round. And let me show you the picture that she shows. And I read all the credits and everything in here. She mentions a lot of other people who helped her, but nowhere does she mention Priscilla Gibson-Roberts. So I think that she came up with this technique on her own. I'm not saying that she copied it. You know, that's how knitting is. Several people can come up with the exact same process independently, and she independently came up with it. But what she learned was how to do it in the round, and I'm looking for the picture here. Let's see. Come on. Because it's the exact same method as what Priscilla Gibson-Roberts had in her book. Now, Priscilla has another book that she wrote before this that in the 80s that was about ethnic socks that I don't own, and I want to get it. In fact, it's on my Amazon list because I want to see if she mentions the intarsia in the round in that book, because she attributes it to ethnic knitting. And the way that she learned, the way Priscilla Gibson-Roberts learned these things was from those samples that she got. Remember, I mentioned she would get the samples and deconstruct them. I'm not finding the picture. Oh. Here it is. It's this page. So she's showing how to loop the yarn. See that loop? That's the same loop that Priscilla has in her book on page 79. See the loop? It's just a drawing instead of the picture of the actual yarn. So it just goes to show, you know, you can invent something new, but it's very, very hard. And I like to think, I am not a Priscilla Gibson-Roberts, but I think the way she does it, I would have been an engineer in another life. You know, when I went to high school, when I was in junior high and you take those aptitude tests to go to high school, mine came out that I should be an engineer. So when I went to high school, I wanted to take mechanical drawing, and I always loved art. I was very good, but I did precision type drawing. And my counselor told me that women don't go into engineering. And I believed her. What an idiot I was. But I went into the medical field instead. And now I do my engineering with the yarn. So that's the last of the books. Does anyone have any more things they would like to ask or talk about? Oh, Scott over here, Scott Tigner. I got to meet him last year at Stitches, and I hope I get to see him again this year. He's working through level 2 of his master hand knitting, and he got his resubmits back. He got his work back, and he needs to work on some resubmissions, and then he's going to be finishing level 2 and going on to level 3. Level 3 is where all of the fun is. It is super fun. So level 2 is really hard. If you can get through level 2, level 3 is a piece of cake, and he's almost there. Okay. I am not a medical doctor. I am retired. I was a physician's assistant for many, many years, and I worked in urgent care, emergency room type settings, and I got to use my knitting skills. I was very good at suturing people and very good at cutting on people and good at poking in needles and stuff. So my knitting skills came in very handy. People appreciate it. In fact, people always want me to do their suturing because I could inject the lidocaine or xylocaine under the edges of the wound instead of through the skin where all the nerve endings are. So anyway, let's see. Anything you want to talk about? Should I scroll back through here and see if there's questions? Valerie Jones says, science proves knitting is good for the cerebellum. Yes, it is. And it helps stave off dementia. I hope I'm never demented. I have a hard time hearing. You know, I have a hearing impairment, but I hopefully can see. I think I could knit without looking, but it would be very simple things. I wouldn't be able to knit very complicated. I think Pamela, and Pamela is a master knitter. Pamela Matthews, she's also a master knitter. She's over here in the conversation. She's giving Scott some pats on the back, and he's probably got to do his Argyle sock again. Yes, but it's okay. And let's see. What is the name of the author again for that book? I'll put all of the books down below in the description. You know, once this live stream is over, then I put it into my video library on YouTube, and I can add descriptions down below the video. And I'll put all the links to all the books. I'll put the Amazon links to them if you want. And let's see. Okay. Nancy Porter asked if there's a difference between the paperback and the hardbook. No, I think the paperback is less expensive, and the cover's been because they're paper. I mean, for books that I use all the time, did you notice that this book is spiral bound? It is not when you buy it. For books that I use, and you can see how much I use this book. See all my notes? Okay. So if you're in my knitting library, all my books have these at the top because I put post-it notes and then make notes about what I liked about things. So I took these books down to Kinko's Kinko's and had them spiral bound. I guess it's FedEx now. It's not Kinko's anymore, but you can go to different places, print shops. You know, they'll cut the binding off the back of the book and spiral bound it. Now, you just need to make sure before you do that there's space in the book for the spiral to be without interfering with the text. Do you see that? So if there's not enough space, let me look at some of these other books here. That might be a good thing to do with this book. Yes, there's enough space to spiral bound. In fact, maybe I'll do that. I think I'm going to take this down and have it spiral bound too. Then it can lay flat, because guess what? When you're knitting, you're using both your hands knitting, and you can't be holding the book open at the same time. It's much easier if the book just would lay flat and stay open for you. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you liked looking at a little bit of my library. The things that are going to be coming up again in the cardigan. Oh, let me put my cardigan on. I'm still working on this sleeve. I'm going to finish this sleeve today, I think. I don't have anything else to do the rest of the day. Okay, let's see. Where's my sweater? It's all tied up in strings. Okay. Here's my sweater. So I'm down just past the elbow. And I'm liking how it's fitting. The arm's fitting really good. See, I still have that inch. It's really coming along. I'm very, very happy with it. So what's going to come up next is going to be, when we finish the sleeves, the very next thing will be blocking. And as I said at the very beginning, blocking is super important. And we will block before we put the button bands and the shawl collar on. And you'll learn why when we get to that part. Now, in my little design here, it worked out that I need to make an increase make my decreases every 8 rows. And it just so happens my little cable is an 8-row cable. So what I did, and I need to make 15 sets of decreases. I marked my cable where it was the end of the body section where I divided the sleeves off. I marked there with a pin. And then I just have to count these things. 1, 2, 3. And I'm down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm on 11. So I've got 4 more to go. And then I'll be ready to do my cuff. That's an easy way for me to count the rows. And then on the inside, here are my decreases where I'm changing the yarn also. So there's my, you can't really see them, but here's a set of decreases here. Here's a set, here's a set. Do you see those? And you can't really tell where I'm changing yarn, can you? Because it's that method that I showed. It's the same thing as helix knitting when you're working with 2 hand-dyed yarns. There's no sign of where you're switching the yarns. It does not show. Oh, Demetria, thank you so much. I almost forgot about those. I have those here. Where are my questions? See, this week my brain is gone. I don't know. I must not have eaten something or ate too much of something. It was ice cream. I had too much ice cream. I don't know. Thank you, Demetria. Yay for you. And Dolise said Sunday live stream at 2. That sounds good for me. We could schedule it for Sunday. This is from Fiddle Beads. I'm swatching with my new high sharps, and she said yum, to make sure I'm knitting with the same gauge as my current Itag project needles, and have 2 questions about it. Do I compare this swatch unblocked to my unblocked sweater gauge? When I get to my knitting in the round swatch before starting my sleeves, do I check that swatch unblocked or blocked? I would, if you're swatching with your high needles, not knitting on your sweater, I would block the swatch and compare it to your blocked swatch that you were using already. Also, for the sleeve, I would knit a swatch and block it. I never ever measure gauge prior to blocking. So you need to block them. I know it takes a little bit of time. It takes away from knitting. It slows down the process, but the end results are worth it. Okay, this is from Florestine, and she says, I thought I had another one from Florestine, maybe. Okay. Suzanne, I have another question. In a seamless garment, how does one manage the 2 ends of yarn when stopping an old ball and starting a new one? I have several of those spots where there are 2 ends. Your video on weaving an end shows a single strand that is at the edge of the knitting. How do I manage where both ends meet in a seamless garment? That is an absolutely wonderful question. Floristine, are you on here? What is your real name? Are you on here? Okay. I'm going to make a video on this. I don't have a video on this, and it's one I need to make because I use this all the time. So Floristine, I'm going to make a video on this technique, and it's probably going to be the very next video that I make because it's going to be a very useful video. This is from Art Lady. Well, this is off topic to the Itag. This is in regards to the swatches, and I answered this already, right? So I showed you that the gauge pretty much stays the same between whether you're using a single strand of yarn or two strands. The thing is to use a large enough needle to begin with. So if you're experimenting, what I would do that I would start with the double strand and knit a swatch and see if you like the gauge and block it. And then that's the needle that I would use if you like that swatch, and use it with the single strand and then the double strand. So because the problem I found in experimenting was if I started out with a single strand on a needle and then I went to a double strand on that needle, sometimes the stitches were too bulky with doubling up on that size of a needle. So this is in regard to this swatch again. That's what I'm talking about, is the striping. Okay, so you want to work with the double strand and find a fabric that you like and the needle size that you like, and then you would use that same needle to do the single strand. Okay, this is from Fiddle Beads. Either I don't understand or there's an error in the updated tutorial. And I fixed this already. Yes, there was an error and I sent out a correction. So you should have gotten that. Please check for the most recent version of the knit along in your Ravelry library. That is the one that is correct. And it's the next to the last page where the correction was made. It's on the decrease round for people using hand-dyed yarn. This is Demetria. Suzanne, I remember you mentioning we can make cable crossings reversible. I might need that on my sleeve cuffs so I can turn them up. Could you explain how to do that? I saw someone with cuffs that had a slit for the thumb and could be used as fingerless gloves. I'll accomplish that by working a couple of rows flat and making the sleeve longer. I want the cable to look good when I'm not using the sleeve to cover my hand. Let me experiment around with that. And if Demetria, if you could link to me on Ravelry and which cable you're using on your sleeve. It may or may not be a possibility. I'm not promising, but I will work on it and we can see if we can figure something out. Okay. This is from DR Curly Fries. How do I do 2-color brioche and carry 1-color cables into my ribbing? That's another video. That's on my, remember I said I made my new little list here. That's on this list. So that should be coming up sometime this week. This is Wire Knitter. I am doing 2x2 ribbing. I was thinking of having 3 stitches at the center front edges. That seems like that would complete the ribbing plus 1 selvage stitch to pick up for the band. I'm using cable set D and wondered where the best place is to end the sort of horseshoe-shaped cables on the cable front on CF so that it flows into the ribbing. It's up to you. You can look along your cable section of that cable and look and see where you think it would be best to start it into ribbing. Sometimes that requires that you do a decrease in with the cable crossing so you end up with a correct number. So if you're doing knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, maybe you want just 2 stitches coming down from the cable crossing instead of 4. So where the cable crossing is, you can do a combination where you work the stitches together while you're working that cable crossing and end up with 2 stitches. Again, if you would link to me on Ravelry and show me your cable and your sweater, just point it out to me on Ravelry, not in your project page, but go to the forum and say, this is what I'm working on, then I can help you. Okay, this is from Demetria. I thought I had another one from Floristine. She says, is REM, R-E-M, Remain or remove? This is such an awesome question. This is probably the best question of the whole thing. If you go onto the internet and you put in Craft Yarn Council in your browser, go to the Craft Yarn Council and then look up at the top of the page, you'll see a thing that says standards. Go down on the standards and over to the knitting abbreviations. And they list all of the commonly used knitting abbreviations. They don't list the wild and crazy ones. It says commonly used. And REM stands for remaining. So it's commonly used to designate remaining. So remove, like remove stitch marker, that's RM, remove marker. Now that's not on their list, but PM is place marker. M is marker, PM is place marker, SLM is slip marker, and RM is remove marker. REM is remaining, and it's commonly used remaining, work until 2 stitches remaining, and it's just REM, and then doing it together, whatever the rest of the directions are. Thank you, Diana. Diana is a lifesaver on these videos doing the timestamps. She reminds me of which videos I say I'm going to do and where I'm going to plug them in. In fact, after we finish this video today, the very next thing I'm doing is plugging in her timestamps for the last few videos that she sent me. And I'm also going to go back and plug in some of the videos that I've created that I had talked about, so I can go back and plug those back in those slots. So Dolise says, Kathy Trajowska, you are doing such an awesome job of throwing out the trash. I know sometimes it's hard to tell who the spammers are. They're very efficient at what they do. They try to kind of blend in with the conversation. So you're worried whether you're throwing out a knitter or a spammer. Most knitting people are very nice, I've found. So any other questions? Is there anything else I forgot to do or talk about? I think I've covered everything that's on my desk here. Does anybody else have anything they else they want? Did somebody ask something that I forgot? I'll give you a minute or so to catch up. I think there's a lag between when these conversations, the chats show up on the side versus when you post them in. So be sure to share my videos with your friends. For Unravel, therefore the one, that's Anne Tremolier said, will you still be there after for the ones who are just starting? Yes, I will. And you'll always be able to come back and watch these videos. I'm never going to delete them. They'll be here as long as YouTube's here. So you can come back to them. I'm going to try to figure out a different way to label them other than the dates. Maybe I could put where we are in the knitting. I don't know. I would like to have them as useful as possible. Pamela Matthews, would be interested in knowing your favorite podcasts where you find good learning stuff? I don't listen to any podcasts. I don't watch any podcasts. I don't have time. But I used to listen to a podcast, and it was the very first one. And it's by Brenda Dane, and it's called Cast On. And I just loved her voice. She had the most wonderful voice. And each episode she would talk about a specific sweater that she had knit and what brought her to working the sweater, where she got the yarn, why she chose the yarn, all the memories associated with the sweater, what was going on in her life at that time. And they're just really interesting. And she always has some lovely music, original work, not of her own, that she shared from other people, and just nice. Right now, I really don't have time, and the only things that I research are what I'm currently working on, and I go into my books for those. I use my books a lot, and as over time, I'll share more of my books with you, but that's the first place I go, is to my books. If I can't find anything in a book, then I will go online and do search online. And then last resort, I'll look at YouTube videos. I really try to not look at other people's YouTube videos because I do not want to be influenced by them as far as my technique and how I'm covering information. A really interesting thing, when Dolise first signed on to help me, when she first figured out that she and I got along really well together and kind of had the same game plan in my group, I'd never met her before that, but we just kind of clicked. she kept telling me that I should do these podcast type things. And I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to fix my hair and put makeup on and be presentable. I just like to show videos of my hands. And I still don't think I would like to do like an hour-long podcast without an audience. Then by accident, we came across doing these live stream videos. And I absolutely love doing this, but I have you to prompt me on what I need to talk about. So it's a give and take sort of thing. I don't just want to sit here and talk for an hour. That would be extraordinarily boring to you and to me. But because we're all working on the same project and have the same goal and we're going along together, it's much more interesting and more fun and educational, I do believe. So I don't mind doing this. So we might have to incorporate this somehow into an ongoing thing, even between doing our knit-alongs. It'll evolve. It'll come along. Okay. Robbie says, I'm thinking about taking your Knit 101, but it's an hour and a half each way. Listening to each week has been so helpful. Any thoughts? Robbie, where do you live? I don't remember where you said you lived. Is it in Orange County? We live somewhere near here. It might be worth an hour and a half. Bring a friend. Get somebody to come with you. Then you can have conversation all the way, and they can take the class too. You go on to Eventbrite. It's a website. Go to Eventbrite. Put that in your browser. Look for knitting classes in Bakersfield. And that's where you can sign up. If you can't afford to buy all 4 of the Barbara Walker treasuries, buy the first one. And then put it on your Christmas list. This is Kimmy Knott. She asked this question, which Barbara Walker book is the best one? It's the first one. And then put the others on your Christmas list. She has 4 that are the Knitting Treasury. The last one, number 4, I could do without. Number 3 is all charts. So she's all new designs in there, but they're all charted. Up until then, she does not use charts. And then she has the 5th one, which is just on mosaic knitting. You can also get them used. These are good books to buy used. A lot of my knitting books that I love are classics and are no longer in print, and I have bought them used. So it's okay to buy used knitting books. And it's kind of cool because another knitter was using it. So she's passing it, or he is passing it on to you if you buy a used knitting book. Okay, anything else? We're good to go? Share my videos, please. Share my videos in your social knitting groups. Share them in your groups on Facebook, not just in my knitting group. If you're not already in my knitting group on Facebook, go ahead and join that. Be sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. This past 28 days, I've had about 200,000 views. The majority of not just this video, but all of my videos added together. And the majority of those are not subscribers. So I have a lot of subscribers still to obtain. Be sure to share with your friends and ask them to subscribe and leave a comment. And I'll get back with you. I always do. So we'll see you next time, Sunday at 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. The next episode that's going to be coming out on this knit along is on blocking. And it depends on when I get my sleeves done. I have to finish my sleeves before I can block. When I have my sleeves done, then I'll be making the blocking video and doing the write-up on the blocking, and that'll come out. So it should be in the next several days, hopefully by the weekend at least, I hope. Okay? So see you next time. Happy knitting.